We're in 2 Samuel. We did an introduction the last time we were together, and we said that the theme of this book is how the mighty have fallen. It's going to focus on David, but there'll be several other personalities that will have fallen as well. Now, back in the day, war movies and cowboy movies were popular. Today it's Star Wars and sci-fi and sorts of things. But either way, in a battle scene, typically if there's an extra and the extra is going to die, he just dies and it's all over. But a hero or somebody with a speaking part, he'll be wounded several times. He'll give some sort of speech and they'll focus on the face. And finally he goes down. And if you read through the death of Saul, you might think he went that way. But that's not how he went. And so let's take a look at this. The death of Saul. The archers got him. He dies by his own sword. Dies by a spear. And ultimately, an Amalekite kills him. Don't burn me at the stake. Not everything in the Bible is true. Yes, the Bible says Scripture is given by the inspiration of God, and it's profitable for doctrine, reproof, and for correction, and for instruction in righteousness. And it's inerrant. But the Bible's not all true. A great example, Satan says, surely you shall not die. Well, they did die. On the day they ate of it, they died spiritually. What's happening here is the Bible is truthfully recording the Amalekites' lives. And so if you have a choice, the way Saul died by the narrative of God or the word of an Amalekite, I'd go with the word of God. And so you see, the word of God says the archers got him, and then he died by his own sword. So let's take a look at this. David hears of Saul's death. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from striking down the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. So he defeated the Amalekites that made a raid on his town. They burned his town. He got everything back. He distributed some of the spoils with the other cities of Judah. And then he hears of Saul's death. That's all he hears. Saul and Jonathan are dead. And on the third day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground and paid homage. And David said to him, where do you come from? And he said to him, I have escaped from the camp of Israel. So what does David know about this guy so far? We know he shows up, he's nasty, and that he escaped from the camp of Israel. Now, if you were an escapee, that means you were a prisoner. So that meant that that guy was either a prisoner of war or he was a slave. But notice that he escaped from the camp of Israel. That's all he knows. Doesn't know his background, doesn't know anything other than he's this nasty guy that escaped from Israel, from the camp of Israel. And David said to him, how did it go? Tell me. And he answered, the people fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead, and Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead. So David interrogates him. He says, David said to the young man who told him, how do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? He's already told that they were dead, but he wants to understand this guy's involvement. And the young man who told him said, by chance, I happened to be on Mount Gilboa. So first of all, by chance, I don't know, because the Amalekites were known. This goes all the way back to Deuteronomy. They would kill the stragglers. They would take whatever they had, and they would leave. So they were cowards, and God told them to wipe them out. God told the Israelites to wipe them out. So by chance, he's escaping from the camp of Israel. If I was escaping from the camp of Israel, I'd try to get away from the whole thing. Instead, he's on this Mount of Gilboa, and that's where Solomon was killed. And there was Saul leaning on his spear, and behold, the chariots and the horsemen were close upon him, or were closing in on him. Well, up against the narrative of God, the narrative of God said it wasn't until the next day that they came up upon him. Now, keep in mind, he wasn't just one body among hundreds of thousands of bodies. This guy was almost 7 feet tall. He had kingly robes on. He had a crown on him. And so he stuck out from the crowd. The next day is when the Philistines came. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, "Here I am." And he said to me, "Who are you?" And I answered him, "I am an Amalekite." So now there's another detail that David learns because he told him that he's an Amalekite. I just got done saying that the Amalekites are supposed to be wiped out. That's why Saul got in trouble with Samuel when he comes back with the king of the Amalekites, Agag. And Samuel says, "What means the bleating of the sheep?" They were supposed to wipe out all the Amalekites. So if he was taken prisoner, he should not have been taken prisoner. He should have been killed. If he was a slave, that makes the situation even worse because they weren't supposed to be controlling them. They were supposed to be wiping them out. He says, "I'm an Amalekite." And he said to me, "Besides, stand beside me and kill me, for anguish has seized me, and yet my life still lingers." So I stood beside him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and his armlet that was on his arm, and I've brought them here to my Lord. So first of all, he didn't mention the archers. He didn't mention the sword. Instead, he mentions a spear. And so what this guy is trying to do, he's trying to play both sides of the argument. He's reporting that he killed Saul. And if David is glad, he said, "Hey, I killed him." On the other hand, if David was sad, he's saying, well, he was going to die anyway. So he was expecting some kind of reward. He took the armband. It was probably a gold bracelet up on there. He took the crown, and he wasn't expecting to run into David because we just read by chance. So he says, well, I'm not going to have the crown and I'm not going to have the armband, but maybe I'll get some kind of reward. And we'll find in the first 4 chapters that there are 2 different guys that were looking for a certain kind of reward, but they got a reward that they didn't expect. And this is the Amalekite that's going to be the first one of those guys. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. So the Amalekite's about to get a reward he didn't think he was going to get. And David said to the young man who told him, "Where do you come from?" And he said, "I am the son of a sojourner." We're getting a little bit more insight. He was not a prisoner of war. A sojourner means a foreigner that was living inside the land of Israel. What was supposed to happen to the Amalekites? Supposed to be wiped out. So here he is, allowed to live in the nation of Israel. He said, "I'm a sojourner, the son of a sojourner, an Amalekite." And David said to him, "How is it you were not afraid to put your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go, execute him." And he struck down so that he died. Now, let me talk about touch not the Lord's anointed. In the Old Testament, those that were anointed were prophets, priests, and kings. Those that are anointed in the New Testament are pastors and elders. And this principle still stands. Touch not the Lord's anointed. Now, there are times when the Lord's anointed needs to be touched. And I will give you a personal experience. I was asked to go along and touch an anointed. an elder. And I was in his house talking about what he should have done and shouldn't have done. At that point, my house was 5 years old. And I got a phone call. John, my house is on fire. End of conversation with the elder, get home. Brand new house, if you will. And the fire, I still can't explain how it happened. There were a bunch of wires, all telephone wires, low voltage, all hanging down and all not touching each other. And that's where the fire was. And I will say, thank God that he struck me with a minuscule fire in the house and didn't do me like the Amalekite happened. So I learned a real interesting lesson, and I learned it not as hard as it could have been. Are pastors and elders immune? No. But you read 1st and 2nd Timothy, and it talks about how you should approach those guys and how you should deal with the situation. And if you're doing the job properly for someone who properly needed the execution, you'll be rewarded for it, and not the way the Amalekite was awarded. And David said to him, your blood be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. And so David goes into this song, which we covered last time together, Oh, how the mighty have fallen. And that brings us to chapter 2. If the clock behaves itself, I'd love to cover the first 4 chapters of 2 Samuel, because it covers the transition from David being a fugitive to David being the king. Chapter 2. David anointed king of just Judah, 12 tribes, king of just the tribe that he was a part of. After this, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? Now, it's interesting here because David is calling on the Lord. We studied in 1 Samuel that there were certain times when he didn't call on the Lord. He had his wake-up call with Ziklag, and now he doesn't take a breath without calling on the Lord, looking for direction. We will see once again, as David is going through the progression of the next 40 years of reigning over Israel, that he's not calling on the Lord as much as he used to. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. And David said, to which shall I go up? And he said, to Hebron. There are 3 cities that I'd like you to keep in mind, and the names of them. The one is Hebron, which means fellowship. The second one is Jerusalem, which means the city of peace. And it's interesting is there's not much peace in the city of peace except for the reign of Solomon all throughout history. And then the reign of Jesus Christ, which I can't wait for. So you have Hebron, you have Jerusalem, and the next one's not a city, it's a valley. You've got Jezreel, which means sown of God. And anytime Jezreel comes up, there's a circumstance sitting there that is sown of God. From the times of Joshua to the time of Jezebel being thrown out of the balcony to the time of Revelation chapter 19 when Jesus comes back. Those 3 names and their meanings are very important. So David went up there, and his 2 wives also, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. Now, I just mentioned Jezreel. We're going to see in just a couple of chapters that Ahinoam has this son named Amnon, son of God. And Amnon is the guy who rapes his sister Tamar. That's going to be several weeks out. And David brought up his men who were with them, everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns, plural, of Hebron. What that's saying is Hebron is a walled city, and there wasn't enough room for his men and his livestock and everything else. So whatever villages were around Hebron, that's where they were. That was his capital city. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over just the house or the tribe of Judah. But Abner, remember who Abner was? He was the commander-in-chief of Saul's army. Saul is dead. And we've already asked the question, where was Abner when David came up to David when he was asleep? Where was Abner when Saul and his sons were being killed? He's the commander-in-chief. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. Now, Ishbosheth is the youngest of the sons of Saul, and he would be the heir apparent because his older brothers and his dad are all dead. And he brings them over to Mahanaim, which means two camps. Now, the first time you hear about Mahanaim is when Jacob is with the angels, and he said there are two camps. There's Jacob with his wives and his concubines and his kids and all of his animals. And then there's God's heavenly host. And the two camps here will be Judah and Israel plus Benjamin. Keep in mind, when the nations were split, Judah had reign over Benjamin, and then the other 10 tribes were the nation of Israel. But right now, it's just Judah as opposed to the other 11 tribes. Two camps. And he made him king over Gilead and the Asherites and Jezreel and Ephraim and Benjamin. So what they're doing a lap of the map. Gilead is Transjordan. That's what's east of the Jordan, up to the north of Asherite and Jezreel, down through Ephraim, and finally the southernmost of all that geography is Benjamin. So he's saying he made Ishbosheth king over all that stuff. Ishbosheth meaning man of shame, and we're going to see what kind of shame this guy gets into in just a little bit. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. There's already a split in the kingdom. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. David started reigning when he was 30. He died when he was 70, and he spent 7 years plus in Hebron and 33 years minus a few months in Jerusalem. So many times when I talk about a timeline, I give you a very gross simplification. Some people will take things like the command of Cyrus to rebuild Jerusalem. They say it's such a month, such a day, such a year, and then dates for this and the dates. That would make my head explode. And so if 0 is the time when Jesus was born, 1,000 is David, 2,000 is Abraham, you split the difference, and in the middle is Moses at 1,500, and you split the difference, and in the middle is 500, and that's Daniel. That's my calendar, okay? Here you see, at 1,003, David becomes the king over all of Israel. I want to make sure it was still behaving back there. Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. So Gibeon means hill, and they're going to meet in the middle. And Joab, now his name is Irony, son of Jehovah. Because I think later on I said Jehovah is king. It could go either way. Because he was anything but a follower of Jehovah. And we're going to see he's going to be a murderer and a conspirator. And ultimately he's going to face his demise when Solomon takes over the reign. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. Now Zeruiah is David's half-sister. And so that makes Joab a first cousin of sorts to David. So it's all in the family. Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon, and they sat down, the one on the one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. So here's this lake, if you will, and the two armies are facing each other with the lake or the pond or whatever it was between them, and they say, let's have a contest. And Abner said to Joab, let the young men arise and compete before us. And Joab said, let them arise. Now, compete is an interesting word because it means to laugh or to make merry. And I don't know if this is like the gladiators, the Roman time, where they're going to fight to the death to make the people entertained. Some folks would take that. Some folks would say this is like Goliath and David, where the winner takes over control. If that were the case, then it makes no sense that the armies of Judah are going to continue to pursue and fight after the armies of Saul's family. So they get together. And they rose and passed over by number 12 for Benjamin, and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. And each caught his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side. Now that becomes interesting, because who is each? Some folks would say that it was the Judah guys that grabbed a hold of a beard and stuck somebody. And others would say, well, they grabbed a hold of each other. And instead of 12 dying, 24 died. If the idea was the winner takes all, then it was a tie if you go down that route. But anyway, they had their battle. And when it's all done, Abner and the guys get out of town, which tells me it must not have been a tie if they go ahead and retreat. So let's continue on. And each caught his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Does that mean half of them died simultaneously? Does that mean all 24 died together? I don't know. Therefore, the place was called Helkath Hazarim, the field of sword edges, which is at Gibeon. And the battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Does that tell me the battle went beyond the 24? I don't know. But Abner and his friends disappear. And the three sons of Zuriah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Joab, son of Jehovah, or Jehovah is king. Abishai, gift of the father. So then you come up with Asahel. I don't know if he was ugly or if he was a surprise child or whatever it was, but he was given creature of God. Now, the way to remember which one of these three was chasing Abner is this. It wasn't Joab, because Joab caught up with the guy later. Abishai versus Asahel. The second phrase gives it away. Now, Asahel was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle. Asahel, gazelle. They rhyme. So that's how you can remember which one of those guys is the one doing the running. And Asahel pursued Abner, and as he went, he turned neither to the right nor to the left from following Abner. He was going after him like a laser. And Asahel is running fast. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is it you, Asahel?" And he answered, "It is I." And Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right or to your left." He just heard he wasn't going to do that. "And seize one of the young men and take his spoil." He kind of suggested what the motivation was for Abishai chasing him. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your big brother?" But Asahel refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out at his back. Asahel must have really been running quickly for the butt of that spear to run right through him. And he fell there and died where he was. And all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. They're coming up and they're seeing this guy that just not too long before was a healthy specimen, runs like a gazelle. And now you see this guy harpooned from the wrong end of the spear. But Joab and Abishai continued pursuing Abner. And as the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah. Those that are watching the Chosen series, every time they refer to a mother, they say Emah. So come to the hill of Ammah, which lies before Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. So they're all chasing after Abner. And the peoples of Benjamin gathered themselves together behind Abner and became one group and took their stand on the hill, top of a hill. So Asahel is dead. Abner continues on. His army continues on. They take a piece of high ground so that they can protect themselves. And now the Judah army is coming up after them. Then Abner called to Joab, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you tell your people to turn from the pursuit of their brothers?" Now, Joab doesn't know that his brother's dead yet. Is Abner here surrendering? Is he trying to call an end to what was going to become a civil war? Keep in mind that word Amma means mother, or it means beginning. And this is the beginning of a civil war. And Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the men would not have given up pursuit of their brothers until the morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men stopped and pursued Israel no more, nor did they fight anymore that day. Because we're going to see that there's going to be a civil war here. And Abner's men went all that night through the Arabah, and they crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole morning, they came back to two camps. 11 tribes, one tribe. And Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing from David's servants 19 men besides Asahel. His troops come back. He finds that 19 of them are missing, and his kid brother. But the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. Between 15-1 and 20-1, Saul's army was losing. And they took up Asahel and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem. And Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron. Which brings us to chapter 3. Abner joins David. Keep in mind, Abner's got some personality flaws. He's figured out that Saul's world is getting weaker and weaker, and we're going to see that exact phrase, and he decides he's going to go over to David's side. But there's a little bit of intrigue along the way. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. And there you see 6 sons from 6 wives. I don't think that's going to go very well. And you'll see of those sons that you recognize Amnon. I mentioned to you that he was the one that's going to ultimately rape the Tamar. Kileab, and David really loved Abigail, and there's nothing mentioned about Kileab from that point forward. Did he die an early death? Was he protected from all of the intrigue? We don't know. And then you see Absalom. And Absalom is one of the famous guys in the Old Testament. He was the one who slew Amnon. He was the one who conspired and actually took over the throne for a while from David. But then you're going to see David wasn't satisfied with 6 wives. He had to get Michal back as well. While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. He wasn't just a coward, he was also an ambitious guy. And we're going to see something here where the Bible doesn't give us a hint as to which way this thing went. Now, Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" The Bible never says whether Abner did that or not. If he didn't, then Ishbosheth did a rash judgment, and he's going to pay for it. On the other hand, Abner was making himself stronger and stronger, and in that culture, if you took on one of the former king's wives or concubines, you're basically saying, "I'm the king." And so there's a no-win situation there. Somebody's got to give. Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah?" Am I one of those guys that we're fighting with? To this day, I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul, your father, to his brothers and to his friends. Well, if he did that, he would have died with Saul and Jonathan, by the way. And I have not given you into the hand of, and I didn't give you into the hand of David, and yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. You decide whether the accusation was right or wrong. God, do so to Abner and more also if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him. Now that's an interesting statement. If Abner already knew that the Lord had sworn the kingdom to David, why is he tinkering with the house of Saul? And there are times in our lives when it's crystal clear what God has to say, and yet we go the other way. To transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan, the northernmost spot, to Beersheba, the southernmost spot. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he was scared. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, to whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring over all of Israel to you. David says, good, I'll make a covenant with you. But one thing I require, that you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. Now, as a reminder, David had to go and kill 100 Philistines to win the hand of Michal, even though Saul said, you kill Goliath, you'll get the daughter. So David sets up house with Michal. Saul gets sour towards David. Saul sends his army to David's house. Michal says, you better get out of town. And she covers up an idol with the blanket, puts a goat skin over the head like a wig. And she said, David's pretty sick. So the soldiers went back. David gets out of town. And then Saul takes Michal and gives her away to another guy. So David is saying, she's my wife. I paid the price. I want her back. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth. So here we see Saul. He's sold his soul to David, but yet he's working his intrigue with Ishbosheth because David's going to send the message to Ishbosheth, and Ishbosheth is going to give the order to Abner to go get that woman. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Now, this is already an insight of the weakness of the house of Saul, because one king says to another king, do something. Why should the other king do anything? There's an inequality of power there. And Ishbosheth sent and delivered her from her husband Paltiel, the son of Laish. Now, Paltiel is an interesting name. It means delivers. So Michal was first delivered to him to be his wife, and then she gets taken away so that she can be delivered back to David. But her husband went with her, weeping after her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go return. And he returned. And Abner conferred with the house of Israel. Keep in mind, Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. So now Abner's playing the part of diplomat, and he's going to the first 10 tribes and getting all of their agreement. And once they're all agreed, then he's going to come to the house of Saul, his own tribesman. He's going to say, the Lord swore that David's going to be the king. Saul is gone. Ishbosheth is a twerp. And so let's give our allegiance to David. Abner also spoke to Benjamin, and then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel in the house of Benjamin thought good to do. And when Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with them. Abner said to David, I will arise and go and will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. We're going to see 3 times that Abner was in peace. Nonetheless, Abner wasn't thinking. There is a principle, it's actually a law called the avenger of blood. And if somebody killed one of your relatives, it wasn't a government thing. The next of kin was supposed to go and deal with that situation. Now, if you kill somebody by accident, you're supposed to go to one of the cities of refuge. There were 6 cities of refuge set up. And the idea was you go inside that city, it becomes a sanctuary city, and you are untouched until the high priest dies. And then you're adjudicated. If you're innocent, you're free to go. If you're not innocent, too bad for you. And so David makes a covenant with Abner, and Abner leaves in peace. Just then, the servants of David arrive with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. So Joab doesn't know anything about this covenant. David is going to try to explain it to Joab, and instead of Joab receiving or accepting David's word for it, he says, "Are you kidding me? He's trying to set you up." And when Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told them, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and Abner has gone in peace. That's the 3rd time. And then Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you've sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing." And when Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah, but David did not know about it. So what does Joab know? Joab knows that David said that there's a covenant there. Joab doesn't necessarily believe it. Abner's at peace. He's got no clue what's running around in Joab's mind. And so Joab sends messengers. If Abner thought Joab was going to kill him, he probably wouldn't have done what he did. But he's at peace, not thinking. The Bible says in certain situations, we're like an ox going towards the slaughter, and that's what happened to Abner. He comes back. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. He struck him in the gate of Hebron. If Abner had gone all the way through the gate, he would have been inside the city of refuge. But Joab stopped him right at the gate and did him in. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all of his father's house." And what a curse he gave him. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner. Now Joab ran the sword, but maybe Abishai was the messenger. We don't know what Abishai's part was, but here they said they conspired, because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle of Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." So here's Joab. He's the perpetrator. He thought he was doing what was right. And here's the king saying, "Tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, mourn for this guy." And King David followed the bier. And they buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. We don't know about Joab. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, "Should Abner die as a fool dies?" In a couple clicks, we're going to see he refers to him as a prince. So he's basically saying, Abner is a prince who died like a fool. Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. You were free to come and go as you please. You were at peace, and down you went. And all the people wept over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, go do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything else until the sun goes down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. I don't know about the 6 wives and the 6 sons. And as David continues on his career as king, we're going to find out that there were several things that did not please the people as we march along in time. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day at Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the son of Zeruiah, left over would be Joab and Abishai, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evil due according to his wickedness.